All right, all right, all right. Another Monday, 4 p.m., at least in Germany, and a very, very warm welcome, literally warm welcome to another freshly squeezed episode of Peak Ace on Air. My name is Bastian Grimm, and with me in the at least virtual studio, not physically, but at least almost, is Dominique Seppel. Dominique, how are you?
Hi, yeah, I'm good. I had a good start, kind of good start into the week. Yeah, how are you? How is it going?
I'd say so far so good, huh? I mean, really excited to be, but it's a Monday, right? But really excited to be back after 1 week's break and a tiny brief vacation, which wasn't really a vacation, but hey, I mean, at least I got some things done which were not work related. So yeah, no, but happy to be back. And yeah, also quite
Great.
excited for today's episode. How about you? How did your week go?
Yeah, I had just yeah, I'm planning to go on holidays.
Yeah.
I'm not here for the next week. So I'm planning my holidays some days off. I'm planning a hiking trip in Austria. So
Very
I
nice.
just did some research. Yeah, so leaving my iPhone off for a week, and yeah, just planning some hiking tracks, and yeah, that's basically it. I finished my book finally.
Oh wow!
Just,
So which one was it? Which one was it now that you did?
It was Confessions of an Advertising Man.
Oh yeah, you said. And how did you like it?
It's perfect. So I read it like the third time now, I guess. I read it first time I'm not sure, like 10 years ago or so.
Right,
I mean, I think this book is like 50 years old or something around that. So it's a pretty old book. But I'm always super surprised how relevant it still is. So it's from I'm not sure. Have you read that before?
I haven't. No, I have to admit I haven't read it. No.
Yeah. So it's yeah, I can totally recommend that. It's from David Ogilvy, and it's yeah. So I'm always super surprised because of course he's talking about advertisement and how to run an agency and an advertising agency, and about how to approach your target audience in terms of advertising. And even it's many years before online marketing. It's super surprising how relevant this book is. So yeah, I can totally recommend that, and I'm happy that I'm done with it now again. I'm
kind of a refresher, huh?
Yeah, of course. So it took like 5 or 6 weeks, and it's a pretty small book actually. But yeah, Netflix came in between, so.
Got it. Have you ever tried like doing audiobooks? I know that a lot of people actually say that they like prefer doing I don't know, audiobooks in comparison to like regular books.
Yeah, I'm mixing that up, to be honest. So whenever it comes to like books about advertising, online marketing, and everything around that, I love to read that really. But whenever it's about like biography stuff and whatever, I love to just listen to it when I'm on my way to work or something around that. So I'm mixing it up, but I think I'm more the reader's person.
The classic kind of books lady, if
definitely,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I can't get I can't stand audiobooks for whatever reason. The problem is I like whenever I have headphones on, and that's usually when I do kind of focus time. I listen to music basically. I know a lot of people say they can't concentrate, and like when they listen to music, for me it's the opposite actually. I'm like when I build like slide decks or like have to do like whatever where I need to focus. Like I just need like noise cancelling headphones, and that's it. So like I'm a huge fan. Yeah. I'm not sure if I have them, if I can show them today. Yeah, I have those like from Bang & Olufsen, and like I love them. That's probably one of the best investments I ever made. So you can like walk around the house or the office, but like basically even if you just sit, you hear nothing, like no kids screaming, no nothing. So yeah,
completely in your own world.
Completely in my own world. But yeah, so and I think for me the issue is like when I listen to a book, then it's the other way around. Then I like want to kind of understand it, listen to it, and then so I feel I can get more out of it if I like really read it. So I don't know, like I never, but I know that a lot of people say, well, it's, and what I can see, you know, in terms of that, it's like a super time saver in a sense of efficiency, as you said, like you're on your way to work, or like when you're in the plane or whatever, right? So I think that is really handy in that regard. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So in that case, it's totally fine. So as you mentioned, like going to work or in an airplane, but same here. So when I'm at work and I need to do stuff or have to do stuff done, I cannot listen to any kind of audiobooks. It's like, okay, I just need music or nothing, but listening to something and then focusing on something else, it's not possible here as well. Because I also want to listen, right? And not like having it like music in the background.
Yeah, very true. Well, I'm glad we're agreeing on that as well. That works. So I think for today's episode, what we said we're going to do is a bit of an update, because A, we haven't been here last week, and I think also B, we feel that, I mean, probably Corona is in general far from over, but I think as we touched on in some of the last episodes as well, some things are getting a bit back to normality, or at least it's not as crazy as it was like 2-3 months ago when the stuff kind of started. So I think what we said is that we kind of also going to now slightly change, or at least add some components, such as a quick update on a couple of things that we feel are worth sharing. I mean, similar to what we did with Paul and Julia and other episodes as well. However, their news were more like COVID initiative centered, but I think we said we're going to broaden that a bit. So yeah, for those that are watching live, or if you watch it afterwards, either way, let us know what you think. That would be quite helpful, I think, feedback in that regard. And probably also in general, in like kind of topics that you would like us to cover. That's highly appreciated. So either reach out to us on Twitter, or email, or wherever. Speaking of, I think you can also leave comments. We should be live on Twitter, Facebook, as well as YouTube and Twitch, I think. So if you like use any of those platforms you're watching live, feel free to leave comments. We'd be happy to kind of answer them. I am just gonna share my screen now, I think, and then we can have a look at a couple of the picks that we came up with. So question is, why does it not work? That's always lovely. Weird. Sometimes I just do not understand why Zoom is not allowing me to share the screen. But there might be a reason for it that I just don't understand. So I just need to then work around that and maybe just share my entire screen. That could also work. Just wanted to share the Chrome browser because I had all the tabs open, but for whatever reason that doesn't work. But I think now there should be a screen share coming up at least.
Yep, I can see your screen now.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't know. That's weird. I mean, normally you can share just the window, right? Which didn't work. But hey, doesn't matter. We managed. So yeah, there has been a lot of things actually going on. I mean, we're not solely focusing on the last week or two, but some of the stuff is very recent, and I think we don't want to go to just like cover news in general, but I think we picked some that add, like, where we feel it adds a lot of value, or as in this case, there's a bit of controversy around what happened. So Google did release, or they said that their rich results testing tool is now out of beta, which well, the tool has been around for, I think, probably a bit more than 2, maybe even 3 years. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. And well, they always said, or had, I think, even a label saying it's it's in beta, and we might be changing things, as that oftentimes happens when Google is pushing out new things. And just like when you scroll through this release post, which they put out on the Webmaster Central blog on July 7th, so like almost a week ago, it gives a bit of a rundown on what the tool can do. Basically, I think for those of you, I mean, probably everyone in SEO at some point has at least had a look at it at some point. But like, it does basically give you feedback on structured data that that's on the website, and then it does like run some validations against it. So basically, it extracts the markup or the schema annotations and tells you, like in the first screen, okay, there's recipe markup on there, there's review snippets on there, and some other things, and then it tells you basically if your implementation is right or wrong in the sense of like syntax or missing elements and whatnot. So like here, it would give you a highlight if something is broken. So essentially, it's and that's actually a very important point. Like whenever you play with schema markup, then you probably would have used the tool to just make sure that if it's not out of the box implementations, that everything is implemented correctly. You could use it or have been using it for like some quality assurance work when you release like new templates, etc., right? So I think that in a nutshell is what the rich results tool was all about, or is all about. So I would say per se that would have not been causing much discussion. But so there's a follow-up post that Barry Schwartz did on Search Engine Roundtable, because at the same time Google said, well, we are going to depreciate the structured data testing tool. And yeah, I kind of can relate that some people were not overly excited about that. I think there's a bunch of reasons, and Barry picked a couple of tweets in here that I think are a pretty solid summary. So Barry Adams, Barry, if you're watching, hope you're well. That he said that, well, it feels like a step back, I think, in a nutshell, because it only validates the schema subsets or the schema annotations. I think that's a very important point. Like when you implement any type of schema, it doesn't mean that you basically will get like value from it, because Google doesn't support all schema, or it doesn't at least result in you having something in the search results, right? So yeah, he said it feels like a step back because it can only do like this narrow, tiny section of Google things to validate, which I think is a very fair point. It's slow. There was a whole bunch of other things around that where people say, like, well, this doesn't work, or it's awful to use, etc. And I think I can understand where they're coming from. Really, it feels like, I mean, I can understand Google to an extent as well, right? It's maintenance of different types of tools. As we all know, there's different like backend and front end systems powering those tools. It's maintenance, therefore. But yeah, it's really a bit of a shame. Like, there's a long post, a lot of tweets, and that is really not cool. There was, however, a really interesting follow-up that kind of is a result of, I think, a discussion on Twitter between Jenna and Aleda, where basically those two had like, why is that going wrong? And then Aleda said, well, what you could potentially do about it. And there's a whole list in this Medium article. We're going to be sharing the resources with alternative tools that are not somewhat centered around just the Google universe, but like there's a JSON-LD playground. I think that's one tool that I've been recommending in my decks on schema markup already years and years ago. It was, I think, one of the first tools that actually came out. Bing has a markup validator as well, which is not solely obviously focused on Google markup, but it's using schema in its entirety. Yandex has one, and there's a whole bunch of others down here. Rank Ranger has one, Merkle has one. I think we have been recommending technicalseotools.com for ages as well. So it's part of the Merkle tool set, and some others. So yeah, if you are disappointed or not happy with what Google has done there, I can understand. Maybe those 3 URLs are worth a bookmarking and revisiting if you're in desperate need for alternatives. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but well, I guess nothing we can really do about that.
What's your suggestion on them? So there were some alternatives
What I really liked, I think it really depends on what you have. So let's say if you're using a WordPress, which comes with, I don't know, Yoast's SEO plugin, those implementations, I mean, yes, you can validate them, but they usually work out of the box because they come with pre-validated markup and templates anyways, right? But what I really like, so in this case here, the JSON LD playground is a bit geeky, but it works the same way. So you can use examples like this one, and it gives you the markup here, or it gives you you can use products for, like, I don't know, which is what you use in ecom, and then you can like create the markup in here and can just copy paste it. So it's actually quite a good tool. It's very powerful. It's a bit nerdy though, because I mean, it's probably kind
of. That's why you like it.
That's what you said. But hey, it gives you all the options. It's not as user friendly, I feel, as the Google tools were, because they were just simplified in terms of the output. But yeah, the JSON LD playground is actually was always my kind of go-to tool. I have not played with the one from Rank Ranger. I know that I use the Merkle tool as well, which is really cool. So Max Prin, who has built like the technicalseo.com with all the tools, it's actually really cool. So it's kind of, this is a guidance approach. So you could say, like, I want to create an FAQ page, and then you can just go, you have a question like this, my question here, and an answer basically, and then you could add like multiple ones, and this is basically then just ready to copy and paste, right? So this is more creation. It's not so much validation in this case, but yeah, it's that's why it's called generator, right, and not validator. But yeah, for that, it's quite helpful. So those guided approaches, but obviously then again, the downside with that is, as you can hear, I mean, they have quite a lot. The most common ones like articles, events, jobs, person, product, recipe, and whatnot. But I mean, if you go to schema, and if you're somewhat familiar with schema markup, it can go crazy deep, right? So I recall we had this pitch a while ago where we actually looked into schema markup for like the car industry with makes and models and manufacturers, and like it was super deep, right? And obviously those tools out of the box don't support it, so that's a bit of the downside potentially. But yeah, I guess either way, I mean, this hasn't been part of the Google tool anyways. Google tool was only to validate, so I guess you're not losing, but like the guidance in generating it can certainly help.
Okay, cool.
All right. So the second thing, which was not as much controversy, but equally exciting or interesting to watch, at least from let's say technical SEO perspective, is that Martin Splitt 5 days ago did a huge AMA on Reddit on, well, he said like JavaScript and Google search, but essentially it was like, it felt like all tech SEO, which is great to be honest. And I think he had like 130 comments. So there was a lot of discussion going on there. So obviously we can't go through that, but I think if you want a refresher on tech stuff, rendering, indexing, and whatnot, that is really a really thorough read. One thing that actually, again, Barry picked out was a discussion that's kind of the source is this Reddit discussion basically, was a comment around service workers. So for those, it's a funny coincidence because on the weekend I have been like playing with service workers in regards to web performance, and I was, so they're around for a while. Basically, the idea is that when you first, or a browser, or a crawler basically visits a website, then for the first time, then you could, as a site owner, you could install what's called a service worker, and that service worker then is running in your browser, potentially, like not potentially, it's running in the background basically, and it can execute certain actions for you. So let's say from mobile phone, if you, that's probably a case that everyone's kind of familiar with. Like you go on a website and you don't have connection right at that time, then there could be, the service worker could be responsible for pushing out a screen because it doesn't necessarily need a connection to your website because it's already running. If you have been there before, it's running in your browser already, and it tells you, well, the site is currently not there, but I can inform you once the site is back. So it kind of in the background pings the site and tells you, right? So this is what a service worker can do, but it could also do a whole bunch of different things around web performance, for example. So once you have visited the site once, you could like store or cache or ship fonts or whatever through the service worker as well. And it all happens in the browser because it's basically installed in the browser. And then, so the interesting thing here is that Martin said that, and I think it makes sense, right? So the way it works with service workers for Google right now is, I mean, if Googlebot comes to the site, they would see that there's the attempt to register this service worker, similar to as you would go on the site with your browser, but basically they're not doing anything with it. So the registration goes, but there's not going to be like any errors or whatnot, but basically they're not executing it. And also, of course, like Googlebot comes back clean. So there's no service worker present. And I think in this case, he just confirmed that there's like literally no plans on ever doing that. And I think from a crawling perspective, that really makes sense. So what he said was like, we have to assume that someone clicking on your page from service a first-time visitor running a service worker is usually not do much good. That I agree with, because Googlebot would then likely see different experiences. As I said, right, you can when it's in the browser, you can do a lot of different things. The site could look kind of somewhat potentially even different, which is what you don't want, right? You want this to be kind of a fresh or similar to a fresh visitor. So yeah, I think this is technically that's quite interesting, because I know that a lot of people are currently playing with service workers, web performance, and some other things, which I think they are really powerful for. But I guess in terms of SEO, you just need to be very, very kind of sure that you're not relying on them to work, if that makes any sense, because Googlebot probably is not gonna support that in like the near, or maybe even ever in the near future. There were a lot of other things. Obviously, a lot of discussions around, JavaScript and rendering and like whatnot. So really cool stuff. So you can just go through it. There's a bunch of discussions around Page Speed Insights API and like the new Web Vitals that they have released. So like web performance metrics back and forth, which I think is also one of the things that Martin is quite involved in. So yeah, really cool. The other thing that I came across, which I found quite interesting, because we've been talking about that, especially on the tech side in the past a lot, is where Google was referring to the crawling in general as, let's say, kind of a two waves approach. So first they come with a, let's say, old school, old-fashioned kind of web crawler, and then afterwards with a slight delay. First it was 2 weeks, then like they said, well, it's almost very fast, like so, like almost real time. So there's this kind of clarification that Martin says, well, we changed it so much that actually this two waves is almost not really valid anymore, because he said, well, the two waves metaphor, I don't use it anymore because it causes more confusion than simplification. So essentially he said, well, it's kind of highly parallel multi-stage process. So that's kind of what came out of it. So I think what you can take away from that is that certainly there's not much of a delay in between those two waves anymore, which if they even exist, which I found also worth mentioning. Yeah, so if you're in tech SEO, that AMA is really a good weekend's read, I would say.
We will leave the link in our show notes, right?
Yeah, we add the links to the show notes just for people to follow up with. Yeah. Two more quick ones, I think, that were also quite exciting. There's a post, or a section, I would say, in Google's help, kind of in the help pages, which is explaining how Google search is actually working. So like in a short version and in a long version, it talks about crawling and indexing and serving those rankings basically. And there's been an overhaul, which some more details, and Jen Slack from the SEM post actually did similar to what she did. Some people might have seen that in the past when she compared like the quality rater guidelines that came out, or like the EAT kind of papers and whatnot, where she did like a comparison. So here's a brief overview of things that change. So again, quite interesting from a tech SEO perspective, because crawling and how to find pages, it's about indexing, it's about serving the results. So that's certainly worth a read. It's not, the changes are not that significant, so I didn't discover really much new things. But what I find interesting is that how search works still kind of focuses around those like 3 areas, if that makes any sense. So like in the conclusion or the final thoughts, there were some significant like changes, though I didn't find them to be very new. I think it was more like updating the documentation with what was already known. However, what was interesting is that they kind of described the concept of, what's a document a bit more, because there's a lot of confusion oftentimes out there in terms of like, what's a canonicalized document, what is a duplicate, etc., etc. So I think, that's worth reading if you're like dealing with indexing, crawling management, and those types. Really helpful. The other thing that is also new, or which Google kind of also did recently, and people spotted it here, was an update. And I don't know, I wonder how people actually do that. I mean, quite surprising to me, but yeah. So this page in, again, Search Console Help has been changed, or kind of gotten quite a quick overhaul. And what has been added is that there are actually regular expressions now that you can use to support, that you can use to filter in the performance report section. I mean, so if you're using the interface and you're not like pulling the data out, which would probably be my recommendation, but hey, if you're using that, you can now use regular expressions use regular expressions in the interface, which is, well, at least a bit more helpful, because like the filter stuff that was there before was really pretty much limited for some of the use cases. So I would still prefer my data studio, but I guess each to their own, right? Or what do they say? And then there's one thing that I kind of wanted to talk with you about, because I'm sure that's like totally in your ballpark, which kind of, I think this is not new, but again, it's quite interesting to see a bit of a the history behind it. Let's put it that way. So there was a tweet from John Mueller where he said, well, there's a lot of ways to work on getting links that are fine. I think that's important, right? They are fine and useful for both sites and the rest of the web. To say all link building is bad would be wrong. There have been, let's say, different tweets in the past, I think, coming from John, but also coming from other Googlers. I mean, they never said, well, like, don't do link building, but like they were mostly against certain tactics. I think this is how I could phrase it, right? Well, I mean, what did you read into it? Like, was it for you like, yeah, well, we knew that? Was there anything like, well, it's good to kind of have the confirmation, or like, what's your take on this one?
So I have the feeling that this kind of discussion is like coming up every week since, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, I don't know. So it's always interesting to see this discussion coming up again. But for me, it was more like a confirmation, like, okay, great. So because I can totally understand that saying that different kind of tactics should be or are black hat in terms of link building, true. But I mean, it's always a way of how to in which kind of environment are we talking about link building, right? So when it's link building, or let's say you build content and have like a proper content strategy and work with your own digital PR measures, it makes totally sense. It just makes sense to give your content away to like media and journalists and whatever. And of course, this is also a tactic, but it could never be black hat. You know what I'm trying to say. So it's like, I think it really depends on which kind of approach you are you have, or you are following in terms of link building. But of course, whenever the topic is about link building, it's like,
And what I find quite amusing, so I just brought it up because I think Barry also linked it. Like there was this, I avoid all link building in general thing that was like mid of 2015, right? So I think that was like a very like direct stance against everything and anything. But I guess what like the problem is also already in the term itself, right? So when is it link building? What is link building in the eyes of a Googler or like in the eyes of anyone really? Or is it, as you said, is it digital PR that results in coverage? Is that, whatever that is, right? So of course, if link building, the term refers to like, reaching out to site owners and ask them to put a link back, then I would agree all of that link building is certainly violating guidelines or black hat or whatever you want to call it, right? What I found coincidentally funny though is that, I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there was a lot of discussion on Twitter around people now using, I mean, we have those new attributes, right? We have like the sponsored thing, and we have the obviously still no follow, and that there are actually people starting to use do follow as attributes in their links. And I was like, what the hell is wrong? I mean, like, why would you even do that? I mean, let alone bothering around with the other markers or the other attributes. I mean, what are you trying to achieve, right? You're just trying to tell Google that those things are supposed to really count, or like what count? I don't get it.
Makes no sense. Yeah.
I found it really confusing. To be honest, I mean, I wouldn't even have thought about it, but it seems to be a thing nowadays.
Definitely,
so I guess at least, I mean, the good thing though is like what I always feel with those tweets is that like when someone kind of comes up with this, we oftentimes I guess have that as an agency, right? This discussion. So like when there's like sometimes teams that are, like have internal fights, and then someone shows someone else like a tweet from a Googler, right? They're like, well, yeah, someone at Google said that all link building is bad, and at least now we can go, so well, not all link building is bad. I think that might help in some of the more political discussions, I would imagine.
Definitely, yeah. We have so that kind of conversations and discussions so many times, and also in terms of like onboarding new colleagues and trying to give a better and broad impression about the environment we are working on or working in. It's always super important to always take a look on the past. So what happened and where the term comes from, right? So link building like 5 to 10 years ago is completely something different than link building today, or should be something different. Let's say it like that.
I was gonna say it should be, right? Yeah.
Should be, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting in that regard as well, right? I mean, like for some people, link building just refers to, as I said, like reaching out, asking for a link, begging for a link, paying for a link. For others, it's part of a broader campaign where assets at some way or one way or the other might result in links or don't. So I think that's the one thing. And the other thing, which really annoys me, but it's true for a lot of SEO discussions, and I was also like quite vocal about that, I think, when I spoke around like SEO testing and this entire discussion around like, is it actually worth bothering with crawlability and indexability and whatnot. But like what people are oftentimes missing is just context. So if you like a super large, I don't know, retailer, then you probably have other worries, at least in terms of priorities, than link building, right? Yeah. But if you like starting out as a new brand and there's actually literally no domain equity there, well, if you're not worrying about that, then you haven't understood how SEO still works. So context is always super important. Is oftentimes, sadly, in our industry, and discussions around that is just lacking there. So
yeah, definitely. And also for smaller brands who wants to get in touch with their beloved target audience, not only via influencer marketing or not only via social networks or social media, it's also a perfect opportunity. I mean, there the backlink is not the most important one, but also creating content which is valuable or good enough and perfect and awesome enough to get covered by media. They will give you a backlink anyways, because it makes also sense for them, and they want to get their users and followers to click over to where the source comes from or the content comes from. It's a very perfect opportunity to get in touch with your audience in a different way, not only via I don't know, influencer marketing or social media, right? So I think it's not only the link building, it's the whole
work. In that case, it's more
strategy behind.
In that case, it's more like a side product, right?
Definitely,
than anything really. Makes sense.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we keep on building links where needed, I would say. I guess that's totally fine. Or now even finer, if there's such a thing like that, than it was before. Another quick one, and then I wanted to take the time and also talk a bit about events, actually, and some of the things that we have seen with virtual events, but also how the future of our event planning looks like. But before we do that, there was one resource that I came across which totally kind of slipped my radar, actually. And that is Bing, or actually like on the Bing blog, there's a quite big and really cool resource on insights around COVID-19 that like Bing kind of is providing based on the search data and trends and behavioral data that they are seeing. So like basically it's a full data set, if you so will, and there's a bit of a preview down here where you can see, like, for example, various trend lines with total number of queries. So like, did the query diversity go up or down? This is like for the US in this case, or things such as, let me see what else we have. Like interest spikes. Obviously, I think we looked at something similar to when we were looking at keyword research or keyword tools together with Kevin. You have like top queries, and how does it correlate? So really cool things, very deep insights in terms of some of the US searches that have been done, geographic distributions, with stuff that's sometimes like even like specific for a certain state, such as the SBA disaster loans in this case. And yeah, you can do data set comparisons. So like, how is it in this case, Washington versus New York for a certain timeline. It's really cool. And I kind of like that they push that out for free, and like even other data streams. So this is COVID-19 queries against the Standard & Poor closing price and stock exchange. So quite interesting stuff there. So if you're in the need for data in terms of COVID, for whatever reason, really not necessarily internal or like campaigning, I think this is a really cool resource to have a look at. And it's they put it on GitHub, so it's available for free. They have like their own feedback channel there. So yeah, I think this is definitely worth having a look.
Perfect source for the next content marketing campaign, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, it's probably worth bookmarking or downloading, or both. Either way. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and also just get a bit of your experience from, is events, right? So I mean, we have been obviously doing a lot of events in the last years. I would say. And we've been both like traveling a lot, speaking at various shows around around Europe, around the globe, either way. And I mean, obviously, all of that came to a quite steep halt or stop in March, right? And I think one of the events that we both really enjoy, and we were supposed to be going as well, was SMX in Munich, right? Which is always happening like mid to end March. So in this case, this year would have been end of March. And obviously, due to all the restrictions and lockdowns and whatnot, their team managed, well, they had to. I mean, they had to decide to move it to a virtual conference. I think it was one of the first big virtual events that I've been doing at that point in time. And I mean, next to like the usual suspects and webinars and whatnot, but I think conference-wise, they were one of the first that moved to be like fully virtual. because, well, what could they do, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you have also been doing, I recall at least, the event that our friends from SEMrush did.
SEMrush event, yeah.
Yeah, and some others as well. So, I mean, let's maybe start with, you know, what's your take on the, I mean, if we take the Corona situation like on the side a bit, right? What's your take on virtual events anyways? I mean, now they're kind of more a necessity than anything else probably, but what's your take on it? Did you enjoy it, or like did you not like it? What were the pros and cons if you think about it?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, I'm pretty happy that we have the opportunity and the chance to organize those conferences and webinars and whatever via Zoom and whatever we have at the moment. So I'm pretty happy that a lot of providers and whoever is organizing a lot of events at the moment. So it's a lot of education for free and a lot of opportunities to have like smaller sessions and webinars and whatever. So I think this is perfect in a situation like this. But I mean, there's always a but when starting like this. I'm something in between, more or less. But what I'm really missing is like having the network situations after a conference or after a conference session, after speaking. So whenever, I mean, you know that as the best, talking on a conference is the one thing, and also having like the emotions from the audience, and you see how people react while talking, and to also recognize, okay, maybe I should leave 2 or 3 sentences more about that topic because people have like question marks above their heads. Something like this is missing for me, like having like direct emotions and impressions from the audience, but also having chats afterwards. So like people coming to you and asking questions, you have super nice conversations. And also what I'm missing as well is all these side events, which we have at every kind of conference on a regular basis, is because there are the super interesting topics, right? So talking with people, I mean, a lot of, also at the SEMrush event, it was like the SEMrush all-in-one conference. It was super well organized. Technically, it was perfectly working. There was a huge audience, and they just set up like different tracks on different meeting or Zoom rooms. In parallel, and then having like the chat room open for asking questions. And of course, it's possible to have like a discussion afterwards, or discussion like having questions in a chat and then or answering on those questions. But there's a lot of emotions just missing, and like spontaneous questions and spontaneous discussions. That's what I'm really missing. So if I would have the chance, I would always go for a real event in person, being there over to a digital event. So both have pros and cons, I would say, but always prefer the physical one. How is it about you?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the let me do one follow-up question, and I might sometimes I have like, so I mean, I guess agree on the latter for sure. I think that the interaction per se is missing. Also I mean, not only afterwards in terms of like, you know, follow-up questions, as you said correctly, or just, you know, having a side conversation on something that's maybe related or not related, just because you want that person's opinion, or you know, people just feel that they want to ask a question to that person or speaker in person, which I think is totally fine and a big part of it. But yeah, so what's your take on speaking at those? Is it the same? Is it different? Is it better? Is it worse? So like, what do you think?
I would say, so of course, when you are sitting in front of a desktop or monitor or your laptop, computer, or whatever, it's like having, I don't know, like a client call, having like whatever, talking to colleagues, and there is something missing. I mean, it's easier, I think, for starting. Having conference sessions, it's perfect because you do not recognize how many people really are listening. But to be honest, I'm missing that one, being excited. to be honest, whenever I'm having a speaker session at a conference, like 10 minutes before going on stage, it's like, okay, I hate myself. Why am I doing that? I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. Whenever I see that so many smart people were talking before my session, and I see, wow, there are so smart people. They are talking like so great stuff. I'm like, okay, is my deck good enough? Do I have valuable enough content and whatever with me?
Right.
And but that's also the good one, because after the session, it's like feeling, hey, wow, I just did it. I had a great talk, and I know that many people learned a lot of stuff today. And this feeling is what I'm missing when doing like the online conference, because there's like, okay, having like a call, okay, bye, that's it. I'm done now.
Yeah.
So that's I would say it's a major difference for me as a speaker. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. I guess I think that's a interesting point. I think if you want to compare like upsides and downsides, I think what you have though with like the virtual events is that obviously the reach can also be way bigger. So I recall speaking at another event where normally it's around the size of like 300 to 400 people. So relatively small, a single track. So that's fine, but it's not huge, right? But it's also not that small. However, so I spoke there. That must have been early June, end of May, early June. And they managed for their online version, because they then made this entire thing for free. They had like 1,200 people on the stream in the single session, right? So I think that's also quite cool, because you get more exposure, as the presenter in that regard. However, what I totally agree with is that, well, you don't have, you don't have the excitement, you don't have the rewarding feeling afterwards. That I think you explained that like quite well. I think what for me, but that's also probably a bit of the like personal style on how you present, or like how your decks are working, is that like audience interaction is almost impossible. I know that some people say like, well, audience interaction is something that you should be doing anyways, and then some are like they overdoing it. But like I think if you have a good balance, I tend to enjoy it, and that kind of results into a feedback mechanism as well, because you can see reactions, and also jokes don't work at all, which is really boring. So that like you do your thing, and this is probably not bad, but like that just no, this is also what's kind of missing, if you ask me. So no, I like this is really it's a bit of a shame. So I would I'm really curious. So I think this is also why I brought it up for today. So again, it's SMX Munich. Time-wise, probably. So what they did, like next to this all virtual event, which actually worked really well, I have to say. When they organized, I got like a bunch of feedback. That was cool. That's probably a good advantage now just that I think of. So I had so Tobias Fox did my moderation, and I had the closing keynote thing, and we did over an hour of Q&A at the end, which you would not be able to do in a live environment due to throwing people out and changing rooms and whatnot. And there were a lot of people with a lot of questions, which was really cool. So I had my calendar free, so we actually we answered so many questions afterwards. I think that's also that's quite cool. But yeah, so I'm curious to see, because what they did now is they not only said, well, we're gonna move SMX Munich, the regular edition, all virtual, but on top of it, they said, well, so Rising Media, the event organizer, said, well, we are doing kind of a summer edition of SMX Munich. Might be a bit smaller, might be a bit different, but that's what they announced in March, right? Yeah. And now come September 1st and 2nd, if I'm not totally mistaken, SMX Munich Summer Edition is going to be a hybrid event. And that's going to be, I'm really curious to see how it plays out. I think it's great that actually someone is doing it, trying to get into some of the normalities when it comes to events. I do understand though that it certainly will be different. I get that, and I'm not sure how the attendee kind of show up rates are going to look like, but what I would imagine is probably kind of a half. There were like some other polls that I've been following where like, yeah, literally half of the people that have been asked was not Rising Media, was just a different person asking that question, like in terms of, are you planning on attending any events this year, like in 2020 in person, or is it like for you, is it all from home, is it all virtual? And it was kind of half, where people said, well, I want to go to one, and then there was others saying like, well, no, I can't. And I think for the can't, there's obviously very valid reasons, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, risk groups, different states, you know, different countries, different situations. So I like no judgment at all there from my end. Just like I can see both sides. However, I think I can also understand that people are keen to getting some of the normality back, because at the end of the day, I mean, we do have those safety regulations and distance and all of those things anyways. So I think if you do it properly for an event as well, it can work. I mean, I'm really curious. I think we are going, right? So I'm curious to see what they come up with. I think we both said like we go in person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious. But I mean, it will be also like, if you look at it from a PK's perspective, I would say, as we like have been having a booth there for like, I don't know, do you recall how many years in a row? Probably 5 years, even more, I would imagine, like literally all time.
Must be six at least, right?
At least 6. Yeah, I don't know, like literally it feels like forever. I mean, that's also going to be different, right? So I'm curious. I'm really curious, but I really like the fact that someone is trying to bring back a bit of that good old conference feeling. I'm honestly really excited to go back on stage. I have to tell you that much.
Just can't believe.
It's gonna. I'm
doing the moderation part, so also very excited how that one will work. So like having the live moderation for the speakers who are physically there, and the same for who's on a virtual.
I think this is going to be really interesting, right? So how that like the setup with the stream. I mean, I recall I did that. So, well, not that, but something similar, like due to totally different reasons. I think it was 2 years ago actually, for John Mueller in Cologne at SEO Day. So I was there present, because I kind of had a morning session where I spoke. And then Fabian, the guy who runs SEO Day, asked me to actually like moderate John Mueller. And John was dialed in with, and that was a very kind of, I wouldn't say shaky setup, but like, that was not as simple as that, because then, you know, you ask questions, then the audience asks a question, you need to repeat it, because I'm curious. But then again, I mean, SMX is like, if you just go back to that, I mean, it's quite well known, no pressure there, for a good and really, really cool tech setup. So I'm curious how that's playing out, because also, I mean, a lot of our colleagues from the US usually are speaking at SMX in Munich, right? And obviously, due to all the travel restrictions right now, that is not going to happen. So I think like a good streaming setup. I'm excited. I'm really excited. Because I thought about it earlier when I did the show prep, and I was thinking, well, you know, like the last events have been actually in February. So I kind of, it is a long time ago. Like Friends of Search I did, and then I did something in Paris, search wide. But yeah, it feels like ages compared to my regular schedules. I'm honestly really excited to go back. I have to say.
Definitely.
And also, that's the point that you said. What I really am missing, and that's probably true, especially for the SEO industry, because, well, it lives of sharing knowledge. It lives of this, you know, I have a network or a group of people that I kind of trust or have a good relationship to, or both, and I can ask questions. And I mean, of course, you can do that. You can do that over Twitter and whatnot. But, you know, I guess the fact of the matter is that if you do that in person, it just is usually, as you said, is more productive. And that is what I'm really looking forward to, because that is obviously for all the right reasons, come to a total stop, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's completely something different to be there, spend some quality time with people from the industry, and just having like discussions sometimes over hours, right? So having like evening having discussions about, I don't know, one small question, it's like super interesting. And SMX, I'm also really looking forward.
Yeah, me too. Do you have any other like virtual ones coming up and planned right now, or
not planned at the moment? No.
all right.
No.
No, I think me neither. Actually, I think the next one that's coming is really SMX in terms of. I mean, obviously it's the summer break right now, anyways, right? So we would have had that break. We would have had that break, Corona or not. So I mean, July there's always usually nothing. And then sometimes there's a bit in August, but then again, already some events have been cancelled prior to that. So I think that that's pretty much my first one as well. I mean, obviously right now there's more webinars, and I've been doing one thing last week with Christoph Kemper from the Link Research Tool. So I think this is like what's happening in between, right? But like, yeah, I think SMX is actually one of the first ones, or the first one that I know of right now, going back to at least like a half physical approach. So yeah. Let's see, and then we can report.
Brightness video in October will be also a physical event, as far as I know.
Okay.
I think it's in October, and I think it will be like a 100% physical one, but I'm not 100% sure. Right. I just took a look at it last week. Yeah. So, but it will be afterwards. But yeah, same here for me. SMX will be the first one. And yeah, I'm also pretty excited to leave Berlin again.
yeah, I can imagine. That's the other side of this entire lockdown. Very true. Yeah. All right, we're almost already at the hour again. So I guess that is us for this week. I would say thank you very much for tuning in. Let us know what you think of the show. Comments, feedback. As always, very much looking forward to seeing that. And we, or not we, but at least I will be back.
You will be back.
Week. I will be back. Next week. Probably with a surprise guest. We shall see how that goes. And yeah, that's it. That's us for today. Have a great and fantastic rest of the week. And we are out and about.
Have a good week. Bye.